Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your term of service as grand jurors. This charge will inform you of your duties and of the responsibilities of being a grand juror, as well as the principles of law that govern your deliberations. This charge contains general instructions concerning the discharge of your duties. The court will always be available to provide additional instructions, and you may request them at any time through your foreperson or your clerk. I recognize that this experience is new for most of you, and that it may be difficult to fully absorb the details of this charge and your oath at this time. However, we will provide you with a copy of this charge and your oath. The primary function of the grand jury is to determine what criminal charges may be brought as a result of cases heard by you, and to determine which matters should not be continued in the criminal justice system because there is insufficient evidence for the charges. Criminal prosecutions do not begin merely because someone accuses another of violating the law. There must be an inquiry made by a grand jury before an accused person may be brought to trial. The grand jury does not determine guilt or innocence. That is the responsibility of a petty jury. When a case reaches the grand jury, evidence concerning the charge is presented, primarily in the form of sworn testimony, and a vote is taken on whether or not to indict. If you determine that criminal charges should be brought, you will return an indictment. An indictment is simply a formal writing prepared on behalf of the state of New Jersey, setting forth the name of the defendant, the alleged criminal conduct, and specifying the criminal statute or statutes of this state allegedly violated by that conduct. The grand jury is an independent legal institution. It functions under the Constitution as the representative of the community. It is an arm of the court, not part of the prosecutor's office. The grand jury does not assist the prosecutor. The prosecutor assists the grand jury. Individual grand jurors are not permitted to conduct an independent investigation of the alleged charges, such as visiting the crime scene. However, you are not limited in your investigations to matters brought to your attention by the prosecutor. As a group, and as determined by a majority of the grand jurors present, you may decide that conditions exist that warrant investigation because you believe a crime has been committed. In that connection, you are empowered to require the production of evidence, to compel witnesses to appear before you, and to return indictments if the evidence justifies that action. The prosecuting attorney is available to advise you on legal questions, and, if necessary, you may request additional instructions from the court. You may act only on the basis of the evidence you receive. You are not to return an indictment unless the state has presented evidence, which, together with the reasonable inferences you draw from that evidence, leads you to conclude that 1. A crime has been committed, and 2. The accused has committed it. Furthermore, when determining whether to return an indictment, you should not consider the potential punishment in the event of a conviction. The grand jury must ensure that no person is subjected to a criminal charge unless there is an adequate basis for it. It is only when you have received such evidence that an indictment may be returned. If an indictment is returned, further judicial proceedings will be required. The defendant is entitled to a public trial by jury, to representation by counsel, to confront the state's witnesses, to testify or choose not to testify, and to present evidence. In addition to the power to return an indictment, the grand jury, under certain circumstances, may return a presentment. A presentment is a formal document presented by you to the public, in which you report on findings and recommendations as to some aspect of public affairs, or to some public evil or condition to which the attention of the community should be directed. The grand jury is an independent investigatory body that represents the public and may therefore inquire into matters affecting community morals, health, safety, and general welfare. In this connection, you may inspect and visit public institutions, agencies, buildings, and departments. If you find unsatisfactory conditions that are of such importance that they should be brought to the attention of the public and the officials concerned, you may return a presentment. If the grand jury expresses an interest in returning a presentment, the assignment judge will be advised and you will receive further instructions. Your deliberations will be presided over by your foreperson, who will administer the oath to witnesses and sign all indictments and presentments. Your deputy foreperson will act in the absence of your foreperson. The grand jury consists of 23 members. 12 members of the grand jury constitute a quorum, and the grand jury cannot act without a quorum present. The grand jury must act as a body. Individual jurors have no official authority. Jurors who vote in a case must have been present and have heard all of the evidence presented. Regardless of the number of jurors deliberating and voting in any given case, no person can be indicted and no presentment can be returned unless 12 or more members of the grand jury concur. If the grand jurors vote not to return an indictment, the grand jury returns what is called a no bill, meaning that the grand jury has determined that there is insufficient evidence to move forward with the criminal charges. It sometimes occurs that a grand juror has formed an opinion about a case before hearing evidence, or may be influenced by a financial or personal relationship to a case, such as being acquainted with a victim, witness, law enforcement officer, a target for possible indictment, or anyone else involved in the matter. Because every case must be decided on its own merits, it is inappropriate for your deliberations to be affected by your familiarity with such matters. In such a case, you should decide whether or not you should disqualify yourself. If you are not certain whether you should excuse yourself from a case, you are required to inform the prosecutor, and a judge will decide whether you should hear that case. If disqualified, you may return to hear other cases. The grand jury must arrive at its conclusions without any outside intervention, including the intervention of the prosecutor, who may not participate in your deliberations or express views on questions of fact. The prosecutor may not comment on the weight or sufficiency of evidence or attempt to influence or direct your findings. The function of the prosecutor is to guide and assist you with the examination of witnesses, assure proper procedures, assure proper admissibility of evidence, and provide explanations of testimony and evidence with reference to the law applicable in the case based upon the evidence that is presented. If for some reason during your deliberations you do not want the prosecutor or the clerk present, you may ask either or both of them to leave the room, and they must comply. These requests are made by the grand jury as a group and are to be determined by a majority of the grand jurors present. Because of the sensitive nature of the matters that come before you, your proceedings must be completely confidential. You must resist any impulse to enhance your own reputation by passing along inside information. Therefore, all of your deliberations and discussions must take place in the grand jury room while the grand jury is in session. It is improper for grand jurors to confer or deliberate privately by telephone or otherwise concerning grand jury matters. Each grand juror has the right to expect that what is said to fellow grand jurors during deliberations will remain confidential. In that setting, there must be the utmost freedom of expression and debate, uninhibited by fear that any views or expressions will be revealed to others. This requirement of secrecy is absolutely necessary to the proper administration of justice. It provides assurance that persons under investigation will have no reason to destroy evidence or place themselves beyond the reach of the court. It protects witnesses against reprisals or the threat of reprisals. It prevents unacceptable damage to reputations. Under New Jersey law, any unauthorized disclosure of information concerning grand jury proceedings with the intent to injure another is a crime punishable by up to 18 months imprisonment. If you are approached by anyone solicited information concerning the proceedings before you as grand jurors, you are to report such attempts at once to the court. Likewise, if during your service anyone should attempt to influence you in the performance of your duties, it would be a violation of the law on the part of that person. Bring any such conduct to the attention of the clerk of the grand jury immediately, so that those making such an attempt may be dealt with properly. With one exception, all proceedings of the grand jury are recorded. The testimony of witnesses can therefore be made available to the defendant and other authorized persons if an indictment is returned. The comments of the grand jurors in their discussions and their deliberations with each other are not recorded. The opposite is true of discussions between the prosecutor and the grand jurors. They are recorded to ensure that everything the prosecutor says to a grand jury may be known to all concerned. The names of grand jurors are not contained in the transcript of the proceedings. For example, if a grand juror asks a question of a witness, the grand juror will not be identified by name. The clerk of the grand jury will make and keep a record of the vote of each grand juror by name on each matter presented for consideration, but this record will not be made public except on the order of the assignment judge. Under our law, an indictment is not official until it is presented in open court to me or to my designee. Normally, indictments are returned only by the foreperson or the deputy foreperson. If the grand jury votes not to indict in a particular case, the no bill is also returned to the court, so that the person charged may be so informed and, if necessary, may be released immediately from custody or bail. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for accepting this opportunity to serve. I remind you of the importance of your duties. In our country, where the stability of the court rests upon the approval of the people, it is essential that the system for dispensing justice be so conducted and maintained that the public has absolute confidence in its integrity, impartiality, and efficiency. You need only to obey your oath of office to be certain your actions will inspire that confidence. Please give careful and impartial consideration to every matter that is presented. Every case is important. It is important to the individual who may be involved, and it is important to the community.